Oh, I never analyze a performance immediately. No. I mean, it's simply because there's no point, really. I mean, it's kind of one of the maxims of improvisation that you really can't do it. That's the death of an improvisation.
Welkom bij Vlak voor de Gong, de podcast van Muziekcentrum De Bijlokken, waar ik muzikanten uit de concertzaal wegpluk om het te hebben over een pre-concertrituelen. Ik wil het vandaag hebben over Jazz Meets Symphonic, een soort gigantisch project van Muziekcentrum De Bijlokken, Flagey en Brussels Philharmonic, waarbij we een gelauwerde jazzmuzikant de opdracht geven om een nieuw werk te schrijven voor symfonieorkest. In het verleden hadden wij al Brad Mehldau, Avishai Cohen en Bill Frisell te gast en dit jaar is dat de onnavolgbare Craig Taborn, pianist en componist. Gisteren was dus de wereldpremière van Heartbroken Suite in Flagey. Vandaag is het orkest en jazzkwartet te gast in De Bijlokken. Het ideale moment voor wat vragen over de invloed van Detroit, over dit huzarenstukje, of hij nu eigenlijk stress heeft voor een concert. En misschien hebben we het al over de geheime special guest van volgend jaar. Hi Craig.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome in the podcast.
Thank you.
Yesterday was the world premiere of the Heartbroken Suite. How was it?
I'm quite happy. I had a great time. I think it was successful on many levels, and I think it was largely just because it seemed like the majority of people involved, audience and musicians alike, seemed to find value in the experience, which is the most gratifying thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to talk about the Heartbroken Suite later on, of course. Mm-hmm. For the people listening who shouldn't know who you are, who don't know who you are, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm a pianist and composer and improviser who was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is in the middle of the United States, in the middle of the United States. So it's cold in the winter, very cold, but a friendly place overall. A little distant, but friendly, people. And that's all I really know. That's who I am. I live in New York now and have for some time, but I'm still a Minnesotan at heart.
Yeah. After Minnesota, we talked earlier, just to be clear. Mm-hmm. So I know a bit about your history. You studied in Ann Arbor, where you played a lot in Detroit before moving to New York and starting that successful career that took you all over the world. Mm-hmm. What importance does Detroit still have for you?
Well, in many ways, I mean, I was raised in Minneapolis and had my first musical experiences with peers there, but I didn't really begin playing professionally or having the real sense of what would become my musical career until I was in the Michigan area. I went there to go to university, and then quickly was playing in the Detroit jazz community and the Southeast Michigan jazz community at large, but focusing around Detroit. And so it was really kind of essential for me. The musicians I met there and the connections I made really defined the rest of my musical life.
Can I just ask something really quick? Because my American geography is not that good, but how far is Minneapolis and Ann Arbor, Detroit? How far?
About 1,000 miles, I would say.
Okay.
It's not close. It's a
quite
good
drive,
12, 13 hour drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
they're not regionally, when we talk about it, they're both kind of Midwestern cities. Because the United States, it's pretty large, so they're both in the same region, but it's not close.
Pretty far away.
Yeah.
Are they different? Do they feel different?
Very different, yeah. Detroit is an industrial city, kind of the quintessential, well, these days, post-industrial city. It was the auto industry. It was very working class and everything. Minneapolis is a bit younger city, feeling anyway. I'd have to look. I'm sure a little bit younger in actual fact, but it's a little more white collar. There's more tech industry companies and things in Minneapolis was not built from the industrial era. It was built in this sort of business era, and it has that feeling. Yeah.
Does Minneapolis has its own jazz scene?
It does. I always, in reading his biography and hearing interviews, I'm always quick to point out these days, everybody identifies Lester Young as being Kansas City, accurately, because he was born in Kansas City and all of that. But Lester Young's father moved the family to the Twin Cities when Lester Young was 12 years old, and he lived there and played music there until he was 27 years old.
So formative years.
So in terms of jazz, I think that's a pretty strong jazz bona fide right there, that Prez is actually has a Minneapolis connections. Going back that far, it's not a huge jazz community, but some notable musicians came or were there and had some influence. And then kind of among my cohort was members of the Bad Plus, who are people I grew up with. There are more musicians now. And there was sort of a thriving scene there, especially for bringing in music. There's a lot of arts. I think because of the kind of corporate model that's there in terms of this sort of white collar culture, there's a lot of money for arts. And so as an appendage to that, it's quite an art oriented city, and there's some great institutions that are bringing in kind of cutting edge art, and that contributed a lot as well to the kind of context when I was growing up. I was able to see a lot of things that other people in the United States wouldn't actually get to see. Things straight from New York that were happening would come to Minneapolis because places like the Walker Art Center and then some of the jazz clubs would bring these bands. So I saw things like John Zorn or Tim Byrne and stuff when I was young, Jerry Allen, Roscoe Mitchell. And that wasn't that common in the States, in smaller cities.
It's interesting that Jerry Allen already crossed your path back then.
Yeah, absolutely. That was when I first saw her.
Because I mentioned it because the Heartspoken Suite that you will be performing here is dedicated in part to Jerry Allen. And generally speaking, the whole Heartspoken Suite, so the new piece you've written for symphony orchestra and improvising quartet, is that the correct title?
Yeah.
Is dedicated to three people from Detroit. But it's more about what Detroit has done for you, of what the feeling of Detroit has done.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was commissioned to write the piece, I had no real clear intention or anything. I just started writing music, and one of the first pieces I wrote quickly, I just sort of was going with whatever flow, and I kind of wrote this thing and I was like, this sounds familiar somehow. And then I realized this really sounds like a Jerry Allen tune, like in a way that, she's a hero of mine musically and I've always been influenced by her, but the process by which I went about writing it had nothing to do with that intention at all. So it was almost startling in a way how much, to me anyway, it sounded like this sounds completely like something Jerry would write. And I was like, what is that about? Like that's coming through strongly somehow in my imagination and everything. So it was clear to me that piece would probably be dedicated to her just anyway. And then as I was writing other movements and other pieces, I was just getting a strong impressions of two specific people who happen to be bassists, who were heroes of mine. They were just friends and colleagues in the industry. And one was a bassist named Tassili Bond. Unfortunately, all three of these people have passed away in the last 10 years, which is what framing it. But Tassili was a fantastic bassist who came out of the Detroit scene and moved to New York. He played with many people. He played with Betty Carter. He played with Elvin Jones, Russell Malone, any number of people. So some people may have seen him over the past years, but he was a close friend and one of my early music collaborators. I had a trio with him in the Detroit area for years and used to write. Some of the earliest music I wrote was actually written for the trio I had with we called him TJ in Detroit. And with a trio I had with him and either Ollie Jackson or Kareem Riggins, and then the other is Mark Trent Mitchell. Just we call him Trent Mitchell, who is another fantastic bassist in the Detroit area who also passed away. And he was just a different. He he was a strong, straight-ahead player, but he had a real funk. He was a really great funk electric player and had ties. He was a bit older than I was and had ties to some of the earlier Detroit scene, and had ties also to the prototype of a lot of Detroit techno scene. Actually, the band I played with him, I discovered this more recently. I had a band with him that included Gerald Cleaver, who's a great drummer from Detroit, that was called Tracy Science Quartet. And he took the name Tracy Science from a previous band he had that was called Tracy Science as well. That was much more a funk-based Prince-style band. But I was noticing recently, anybody who knows Detroit techno, that another member of that band was Mad Mike Clark, who's founded Underground Resistance and UR Records. So, and I hadn't even connected that down. I was like, oh, I played in the same band in a way that Mad Mike had at some point. We played very different. We were playing this sort of Miles Davis influenced jazz, and that other band was much more Prince inspired. But it's all connected. So anyway, that was the final movement of this is sort of dedicated to Trent, and it has the implication of some of this funk thing. And he was also really into certain kind of fusion and progressive rock. So it's just the hint. I didn't lean on these things too strongly, but just that feeling of
you
him.
can feel him in the music.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's very personal. Like there's references in the music that more so than some of my other compositions has. There's a personal thing in it where I'm really thinking about these personalities. Yeah.
You've spent all week rehearsing in Brussels. In an earlier conversation, you mentioned you were looking forward to working with Ilan Volkov, conductor. So how were the rehearsals?
Fantastic. Yeah, he did not disappoint in any way. Yeah, it's a special situation with him because he's a fantastic conductor with a lot of experience and this, the true capacity to deal with traditional orchestral music and traditional orchestras. But he's also just in talking to and knowing him, and I knew this because we have sort of mutual friends from the past. Even though I hadn't known him before dealing with this context, working on this. I met him a few years ago about this, but he's a real music fan in the same way I am, which is wildly eclectic and kind of voracious record store, like looking for them, the most obscure labels of Japanese noise music and trying to find this one album somewhere and just going on at length about this. And that is
he was looking for the same album.
Yeah. He's this kind of person. Yeah. So his capacity for and context for the world of sound, as Max Roach always puts it, just the world of music is vast. So he's just sort of ready to receive and knows how to interpret so many different kinds of music and integrate it with into this orchestral context. Bringing together his skill set with that inclination and sort of those aesthetic inclinations is, I think, relatively rare. Just because it's in any kind of music, it's just those kind of. I say this in the best way because I consider myself one, but those kind of weirdos don't come along that often. It's sort of a special group of people who are, as much into, Beethoven as they are into Stockhausen as they are into some, like ambient electronic music or some noise avant-garde metal or whatever it is, or some, like Laotian, music, whatever it is. It's just, and really invested in it, and then having a concept of, I can bring that interest into this. I know exactly what to do with this.
You will understand when I mention.
Yeah. And then, so with an orchestra, maybe we can do something like this to bring that out more or something. Yeah.
I've seen you talk about Belgium, and it feels like a second home to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Why? I think I've been here a lot. I think, in particular in Belgium, like my music has been welcomed, and I've come, and then now, in particular in Ghent, it just seems I end up coming here quite a bit, and I've it just feels like I know a lot of people here, and the community's always felt very welcoming. Like when I come to, in particular to Ghent, I can walk around and I know people and I know the cafes. It's like it feels very like, oh yeah, I know this neighborhood and I know.
Okay.
I can just relax into things.
Always welcome here, you know that.
Wonderful.
Do you still feel stressed before you go on stage?
Not really. I don't think I feel too stressed. Yeah, it's almost the opposite, because even regardless of I may feel some excitement at certain points, but it's just I've performed enough in my life that it's sort of a very natural place to be.
Yeah.
So when I say it's just the opposite, it's that I feel like the minute I go on stage, I feel more relaxed.
Yeah.
Even in the face of like, I don't know this music, or I think this is going to be a terrible, like I think I'm going to mess this up. It's still like, but I'm home. You know, it's like I'm comfortable playing music. So
I think you have to be that comfortable. For example, you give solo concerts which are fully improvised.
Yeah.
If you're not feeling comfortable on stage, you can't do that. You have to be free.
Yeah. So it's something about that where. Yeah, it's not so much that I'm always feeling hyper confident or like this is going to be great. It's not coming from any ego. Mm-hmm. It's just that I feel more comfortable there than more in many social situations. Mm-hmm. I'd be more nervous at a party, you know, or something. It's like, oh, I have to meet people.
That's why you throw your own parties.
Yeah. Exactly. But once I get on stage, sitting behind the piano, it's like, okay, well, I know I can do this and I know what to do, and I'll do this to the best of my ability. So nerves don't enter into it too much, no. But I do have, you were saying like rituals. I do, not so much for this, but for like the solo performance and stuff, I do have a certain, like it's usually best if I can have a half hour and I just run these exercises that I've done since starting the piano. And if I can sit at a piano and run through those exercises, it seems to center everything. Mm-hmm. And I think I learn a lot about the instrument by doing them. But it's a very simple kind of like beginner piano studies, technical exercises. And I don't do them so much as a practice for technique. It's just more it's a warm up.
Yeah.
But I definitely do that, or I try to do that before concerts. Not so much these, but for solo concerts, it's like if I don't get that, I tend to feel like, oh, I'm not ready yet.
You don't know the instrument.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What
is the very last thing you think about before you go on stage?
Ooh, that's a good question. It really depends. I'm not sure, because I think there's a certain aspect of I'm already entering a different state of mind that's not too cognitive. So I'm not sure what the last thought, because sometimes it's like in these groups, like last night even, it could be talking about something totally unrelated. Like with Chess Smith, for instance, we'll often be talking about something completely unrelated, just as an ongoing conversation that's been going on. But I think some of that is a way we have of just getting out of our heads. Mm-hmm. Like some people would feel like that would be a violation of a process, because you have to be in the moment to present the music. And I think it's a way to get yourself out of being too overthinking the process. So it's just like, okay, because the music's going to happen naturally. So
it flows freely from
exactly. So it's like these interactions, because if you're interacting and laughing or having a thing, and then you go on stage, you carry that energy. Mm-hmm. And the communication continues in another way with music. And I think that's why a lot of people I know do that. You know, it's like, because it's improvisation where we have to be engaged, you know, and on the fly. So if you get if somebody's too nervous and too in their head, they're closed in and they're not open to things. So I'm not. It's hard to answer your question because I actually don't know what the last thought is.
Very good answer. After the concert, do you tend to enjoy the moment, or do you start analyzing the performance immediately?
Oh, I never analyze a performance immediately. No. I mean, it's simply because there's no point, really. I mean, some people do, but there's no point. It's kind of one of the maxims of improvisation that you really can't do it. That's the death of an improvisation while you're doing it. And then right after the performance isn't the time. I mean, there's nothing you can, there's not really that much to talk about. Yeah. I have friends who do. I'm not so into that. I'm like, stay away from me. I don't need to talk about, I messed this part up. It's like, yeah.
It happened.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's over, like as part of my practice, if I'll check in on periods and listen to recordings, and then if I'm hearing certain things, I'll do some work that way, but no, definitely not right after. Mm-hmm. I can just sort of enjoy, because any musical performance is still an accomplishment and an achievement at some level. So I tend to just enjoy the fact that we've just done that, you know? Yeah.
Okay. So Jazz Meets Symphonic is a yearly tradition or bi-yearly tradition of Muziekcentrum de Bijlokke, Flagey, and Brussels Philharmonic. Mm-hmm. We know next year's guest, which is Jacob Bro, of course, who you know because you recorded an album with him last week.
Yeah. This is true.
And I was wondering, has he mentioned something to you about it? Has he asked for any tips or?
Oh, absolutely. Well, one of the main things that was big is, when I was doing this, because I have no prior experience with writing for orchestra or for symphony orchestra, anything of this size. I've done smaller things. I have no real confident skill set with orchestration, and how to set. Arranging, I do. Like, I know how to I want to set up the composition and unfold and have a vague sense of the registers and timbres. But, so I hired an orchestrator, a guy named Michael Atkinson.
Yeah. He did a wonderful job.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And apropos, thinking of orchestras and jazz, we were both doing, in November, Jakob and I were both involved in this thing of a concert in Poland doing Ornette Coleman's Shape of Jazz to Come arranged for orchestra with Donardo Coleman, and it was like Ambrose Akinmusiri and Isaiah Collier, and Jakob Bro and I were the soloists. So we were rehearsing there and hang out all that week. We were just talking, and I was telling him, this was just right at the end. We had turned in the piece in early October with Michael and I. He had finished the engraving, and then I was just telling him I had a good experience. And it was right at the same time, I think, that he was talking with the Brussels Philharmonic people about what he would do. And then they suggested, Craig used this Michael Atkinson, and I had just been telling him what a good experience I had. So he had asked me for that information. So I think he's using Michael for his things as well. So there was that connection, yeah. And what I know is that, just last week he told me, we did the recording, and then I played with him the night before I flew over here. And then he was like, I need to get working on that piece. So I know he's,
but
But I think he's starting it now. Yeah.
He has to, yeah.
That's what he said. I got to get going next week.
All right. Craig, thank you very much for this conversation. Enjoy the concert tonight. And
thank you
see you soon back again.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Wat een fijne man. Ik zou zomaar uren kunnen luisteren naar die warme stem, maar de plicht riep, want de repetitie moest dringend beginnen. Het was trouwens een prachtig concert. Mocht je het gemist hebben, dan kan je ofwel herbeluisteren op Clara, ofwel hopen dat de muziek binnenkort op plaat verschijnt, zoals bij Bill Frisell of Hurricane reeds het geval was. De muziek die je dus vandaag hoorde waren fragmenten uit Craig Taborn's Hard Spoken Suite voor symfonieorkest en improviserend kwartet, uitgevoerd door het Craig Taborn Quartet en Brussels Philharmonic onder leiding van Ilan Volkov, opgenomen hier in de Bijlokke. Dit was Vlak voor de Gong, een podcast van Muziekcentrum de Bijlokke. Vond je de podcast leuk? Laat dan zeker een review achter op Spotify, Apple of YouTube en deel je liefde met vrienden, collega's en familie. Bedankt om te luisteren en tot de volgende keer.